fresh in their minds and they have a lot to share with us. So we have Rose Turner. So she finished her thru-hike in 2019. And we have Chris Johnson, who thru-hiked with his dog, Winnie. And I will tell you that Winnie has a great social media presence herself. So it would be interesting to hear their stories from their perspectives. And I will say both of these thru-hikers work at mountain trails. So you can always visit them there. You can get gear selection tips from them there, and maybe other outdoor skill advice as well. Rose and I also work together on the Appalachian Trail Community Committee that serves the Front Royal Warren County area. So we've had a lot of fun together. All right, so why don't we get started? And we're going to start with a tradition on the trail, and that is trail names. So if you don't know what that is, well, let's talk a little about the Appalachian Trail first. I assume everybody knows what it is. So the Appalachian Trail is a trail that's like 2,100 plus miles. It has a northern terminus in Mount Springer, Georgia, and it has the northern terminus at Mount Katahdin in Maine. And it passes through 14 states, and Front Royal is almost the midpoint in that trek. And we service a lot of hikers, thru-hikers who come here. A thru-hiker is somebody who hikes the whole trail, typically within 1 year. And then there are people who are called section hikers, and that means they're just doing smaller pieces of the trail at a time. Some people will complete the whole trail by section hikes, but they'll do it over a longer period of time. We met an author last year who took 30 years to complete his hike of the Appalachian Trail by doing a piece at a time. Every year he went for like 2 or 3 weeks and just kept progressing along. Many of you may have spent some time on the Appalachian Trail, maybe for a couple hours, and that would be considered a day hike. Okay, so back to that tradition, which is a trail name. I have heard that some people will give themselves a trail name, which is kind of like a nickname, but generally it's given to you. And it's usually given to you by other thru-hikers based on maybe a kind of quirky personality trait or something that happened, something that you're carrying, something that you do. So why don't we find out from our two guests what their names are and how they earned them? And maybe we'll let the lady go first. Rose?
Well, my trail name is Comics. I got my trail name pretty early because people noticed that I was making comics and noticed I didn't have a trail name yet. So someone whose trail name was Pegleg gave me the trail name Comics because I was making comics along the way to document and fund my trip. So yeah, that's my name. It's not Cowmix, it's not Comets, it's not any of those things. It's Comics.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
My trail name is Anubis. I got it on the Tuscarora Trail, which is another long distance trail in our area. I got it because I got into backpacking, trying to deal with a broken heart. So whenever I'd run off into the woods and do longer hikes, my heart was kind of healing. And Anubis was the Egyptian god who prepared the heart for the next life. So it's kind of like a deeper trail name meaning.
Awesome, I love it. I love it when the names really reflect someone. And I think with both of you, I think Rose, I've seen your art, and your art sometimes reflects something really deep as well from your soul and your connection to the woods and the trees and nature. And Chris, that's cool too. So let's also talk about your hikes. So maybe just you can describe for everyone, did you go northbound, southbound, or some variation? And then maybe give a little insight why you chose that. We'll let Chris go first this time.
I went southbound, so I started in Maine and ended in Georgia. For me, it was all about finishing with my dog. I would have liked to have gone northbound, but dogs aren't allowed in Baxter State Park, where Mount Katahdin is. So it was important to me. I wanted her to be with me at the finish, so that was the main reason I ended up going southbound.
I also went southbound, and for me, part of why I chose that, it's funny because northbound is the traditional way, but it kind of never really occurred to me to go northbound, just because of timing. I was graduating from college a few weeks before I started the trail, and also I just had it in my head that if anything were to happen and I had to get off trail early for some reason, I wanted to at least have seen the part of the trail that was most different from what I had seen. So for me, that was the whole New England section. So I'm glad that I went southbound.
Awesome. So why don't we share now, what was your first inspiration to through hike? And was there a special reason that prompted you to say, this is something you wanted to undertake? Was it always a dream, or what was that inspiration? How about Rose? Go first.
I mean, I've always loved hiking and being outside. And I have kind of an insatiable, not just desire, but need to move. Got someone's sound on. I'm not sure where that's coming from.
There we go. Sorry.
It's okay. I remember, I think I found out about the trail when I was a teenager, and it wasn't long after that I was kind of just vaguely thinking, eventually I'll do the trail, not really having a timeline or anything in mind. And I remember I went to college in Roanoke at Hollins University, and my best friend came to visit me, and we went to do like a totally idyllic day hike of McAfee Knob. It was like a weekday, so it was not crowded. There's just a couple people there. There was a couple doing like a wedding photo shoot or engagement shoot or whatever, and there was a rainbow behind them. And we were hanging out at the top of the mountain, and a bunch of southbounders were there too. Some of them had made it to the top with us, and then a bunch of their friends started collecting. There were like 7 or 10 of them, and we were chatting with them, and I gave them some tea that I just always had in my backpack at the time. And they just were having the time of their lives. And so my best friend and I, which for the record is Andrea Groves triple knot on the trail, we just like looked at each other, and the whole way down the mountain in the dark, we were like, so what if we actually do this, like starting next spring? Like, we can do this like soon. So we started planning, and we made it happen. I think originally I was only planning to do, or only expecting to do, like maybe half of it. And I'm not sure when that really switched, but I think I had already kind of been consumed by the hiking culture by the time I even got on the trail, and was already decided I was going to do the whole thing. So yeah, that's my story.
One, thank you. Hey, Chris.
It's actually funny because my sister, she had a northbound attempt in, it's either 2009 or 2010, I think. I paid no attention to it. I didn't understand what she was doing. I was living in Virginia Beach at the time. I didn't know what the Appalachian Trail was. I was definitely one of those family members that was like, you're going to die, like a bear's going to eat you. And I just wasn't invested in it at all. She made it to New Hampshire, and I never really thought much about it until I moved up into this area, and kind of going back to, getting into backpacking after a breakup and all that. And I remember running into some thru-hikers near Bear's Den, and just being completely blown away. They didn't even stop at the overlook. Like, you know, in hindsight, I now know they were eyeing Harper's Ferry. They wanted to get to that halfway point. But I remember seeing this group of guys and then running into other thru-hikers that weekend and realizing it wasn't, like, I pictured thru-hikers, you know, like there was like 12 people a year that, you know, carry 6 months worth of food on their back. And I had this idea of what it was that wasn't even accurate until I started meeting thru-hikers. And I was like, you guys walked here from Georgia? And as I just kept backpacking, you know, every weekend and running into more thru-hikers, and I started to get really obsessed with the idea of doing the whole thing in one shot. And then I started going down the rabbit hole, you know, on the internet and chat forums and Instagram. You know, as I started gaining more confidence in my backpacking and learning more and more about thru-hiking, I just knew it was something I had to do. Like, if I was on my deathbed and I didn't thru-hike the AT, like, that would have been my like one regret.
Gotcha. Wow, those are great inspirations. Thank you. And I think from my own reading memoirs and talking to a lot of thru-hikers, everybody has a deeply personal reason. So thank you for sharing. You also each had a very different type of hike. Chris, you had your dog, and you know, Rose, you're an artist, so I'm sure you saw it through a different lens. But let's talk a little bit. Did your hikes go as you planned?
Nope.
I see laughter and shaking of heads. All right, so I know both of you experienced injuries also that had to be addressed, and they kind of stalled your hikes. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened with that, but also other things that maybe were not what you expected.
I'll let Rose go first.
Can we always do ladies first then? Okay.
So as far as the injury goes, I got a stress fracture somewhere in my foot, somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Those rocks.
I didn't know it was a stress fracture at the time.
We'll just blame the rocks.
Yeah. And you know, I didn't know it was a stress fracture. I thought maybe it would just, you know, go away in a couple days kind of thing. It wasn't really inhibiting me that much at first. Just kind of like a little bit of a limp. And so I kept on hiking for 530 miles after that.
Oh my,
yeah, on a stress fracture, which is not advised. It caused permanent damage because so for anyone who doesn't know, a stress fracture is when it's like the bone has broken a little bit, but it's still like partially connected. So because I kept on walking on it, the bone disconnected, and my chiropractor called it a little bone island, which is going to be in the trail comics. It's going to be really funny. And yeah, so on October 31st, I had started June 10th. I got off trail, and it really wasn't because of the stress fracture. That was just kind of one of the factors. It was just kind of a combination of that, and winter was coming on really early that year, and it was also a really wet year, wettest year on record, 2018. And I had already almost gotten hypothermia, or started to get hypothermia that year, and so I was kind of scared of that. And then it just got really isolated, and that was really hard for me to deal with. And I knew it was going to suck being at home too, but I just like figured it was the best choice for now, and, you know, get back on the trail in the spring when I would enjoy it more. And so like 5 months later, 3 months later, I finally saw a doctor. I was broke. So immediately she got me some what are those called? Things that you use to help your feet.
Orthotics or something?
Yes, orthotics. Thank you. And that like immediately started helping. In fact, my boss saw me like a couple of days after that, and she's like, Rose, why are you smiling so much today? I'm like, I'm not limping. And so that was huge, and gave me a lot of hope that I could actually like get back on trail in time to be an official thru-hiker, you know, finishing before it's been a full year since I started. And so when I got back on trail in the spring, a few weeks in, I got another stress fracture in my other foot, which was much worse. And that's the first time I took ibuprofen on the trail, which is silly, that I didn't use it sooner. But yeah, I still finished, and then got that taken care of, but I couldn't run for a few months after that. So that's the injury part of it. What was, you were just asking about how plans changed?
Mm-hmm.
I definitely thought that I would go a lot faster in the, not in my like hiking pace, but in my day-to-day pace, if that makes sense. Like my overall like miles in a day and time spent in town kind of thing. And a lot of that was slowed down because of my hiking partner, my best friend. And she's a very fast hiker. She's usually at least as fast as I am, often faster. But we just have a very different way of navigating through time, which has been interesting to notice. And she also, less so now, but at the time she had pretty severe insomnia that we thought, you know, living in the woods would help with, but it didn't. And so she was not really able to get started until pretty late in the day, and I didn't like night hiking, and so it was a very short window of time for hiking, and it wasn't doing either of us much good. So we ended up splitting up, which I think is still the hardest decision I've ever made, but we're still best friends, still talk every day. And we both still finished the trail, which I don't know if we could have if we had kept hiking together. So yeah, those are kind of the two biggest things as far as how my plans changed.
And I think that's really illustrative too of what people say hike your own hike, is that
Yes.
all the research you do and all of you talking to a lot of other thru hikers or other experiences, or even when you start with a partner, you may have to make that hard decision because at the end you're still going to have to do it on your own and what works best for you. Great, thank you. All right, Chris, you're up.
Well, I will say I've met a lot of people. Well, especially at the beginning of my hike, and then the end of my hike, I actually met the first 21 northbounders in 2020. But I would meet people that had like this rigid plan. I'm gonna get to this shelter, but they'd like map out their entire hike. I don't even think it's really possible to plan beyond like 3 or 5 days. I think, I know at least on my hike, I don't think any of it went the way that I had planned. I was out there longer. Winnie joined me for the second half. So when I was in New Hampshire, she wasn't with me yet. She had to have surgery on her leg. My appendix blew out on me in Tennessee. The weather wasn't what I was expecting towards the end. So yeah, I think, not that I was expecting, I'd done enough long hikes to know, it wasn't going to be sunshine every single day, but I don't know, there's like a harsh reality that sets in, and all of a sudden it's been raining for 2 weeks. Everything smells like mildew, or, you're planning on getting to this town in X amount of time and it takes longer. So yeah, I think, as far as a thru hike, it's just not going to go the way the way you planned. Yeah, you're gonna have a different idea than what it ends up actually being. I don't know if that answered the question.
It does. It actually does. I think you can do a certain amount of planning, but then be flexible and maybe not have an expectation. Don't just get out there for the journey and, I mean, you need a sort of plan, and maybe we should talk about that a little bit. But before we hop into like details about resupply and things like that, you touched on something that maybe we could talk about a little bit, and that's the daily grind of hiking. So maybe talk a little about that and some suggestions for future thru-hikers. Like, is there a way that now that you've been through it, is there a way that you can prepare a little bit more physically and or mentally for that? Like, did you ever adjust and get into a rhythm, or?
Was that directed towards me, or is Rose going first?
Whoever wants to jump in can go ahead.
I guess since
Go
the
ahead.
camera's on me. One thing I found, like here in the real world, when people are like, "Oh, what's your hobby?" My hobby's backpacking. But when you're on a thru hike, that's what you do every day. So I do think, for me, photography, I carried a full DSLR camera. Rose had, drawing comics. I've met other people that paint. I hiked with this guy, Bunkhouse. Like, his favorite part of every day was crawling into his sleeping bag at night and reading from his Kindle. So I do, because the walking part of it gets pretty old pretty quick. You're getting up, you're eating the same thing for breakfast, you walk for 12 hours, you set up camp, go to sleep, repeat. So I do think having some kind of hobby while you're out there. I carried a little kite for a while at one point. I flew it on top of mountains up in New Hampshire, the Balds. And it seems like such a silly thing to carry, like this little ultralight kite.
That's adorable.
But yeah, but it was something to break up. Even eating lunch is like the same thing every day. So if you can take a break, on top of a mountain where there's no trees and fly a kite for an hour. So yeah, I'd say after, it's like somewhere between 500 and 800 miles, I was over the walking part, especially, the green tunnel. You might walk days where there's not even a view. Podcasts, audiobooks, just figuring out, what you can do. And as far as like training physically, my body was in such shock regardless for like the first 500 miles. And then at that point, your body is just used to it. You get up and you walk. But the mental aspect was what really caught me off guard. Like, where you really start asking yourself, like, why am I doing this? And that's where it's important to have a good network back home, or a trail family on trail that you can kind of, I'm having a bad day, like I don't want to do this anymore. And you have like a sounding board to talk about, all the feelings you're experiencing out there. And it's really, they say it's 90% mental to complete a thru hike. And I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and that's what I hear from a lot of the endurance athletes, and particularly those thru-hikers who've set, the fastest times of thru hikes, like Jennifer Carr Davis. In fact, her book Pursuit of Endurance really talks about that. It's really that mental, and it's something very specific within these athletes like yourself who are going the distance. It's a very unique trait. So Rose, what would you say about that? In terms of the daily grind of hiking, and how did you respond, or is there a way to prepare for that?
I would definitely agree with Chris that it's mostly a mental game. I took this wilderness survival class at one point in college, which was a blast, and the teachers for it are some of my favorite people that I've ever met. One of them was Dina Imbriani, who is an absolute badass. And one of the things she said was positive mental attitude is your first defense, basically. And that goes for anything in life, not just backpacking. And so I thought about that a lot on the trail, and I think about that now as I'm like prepping for shorter backpacking trips and things like that, like the, you know, being prepared ahead of time to keep yourself in check is really important. So, you know, as Chris was saying, like one of my tricks also is, you know, loading up my phone with podcasts and things like that. I always bring a battery pack now. I didn't have one for the whole first half of the trail. But I was finding that as the days were getting darker and the season was changing, like I really needed more access to music and podcasts and being able to phone a friend if I had signal and was like crying at night. Like I had like a couple, mostly one friend that I would call, just because usually I wanted to call my mom, but I'm like, I don't want to make her cry, so I'll just call my friend. And he was a really good sounding board for, you know, he would hear me out and also like get me to talk through stuff. And he always has good advice. Shout out to Colin Mason. Yeah. Yeah, and then definitely, like, even without having it on my phone, just like singing to myself really helps. And so I try to have songs memorized, just so that I can bring those to mind at any time. And then just having some variety helps. Like if you can not have the same food all the time, like maybe for this week's resupply you'll have bagels for lunch, maybe next week it'll be tuna, I don't know, maybe you'll pack out a Subway sandwich or two. But just the variety really helps for me.
Awesome. Great, those are great tips. And why don't we move into that area? Let's talk a little bit about you know, kind of nuts and bolts. Why don't we first start style backpacking? Why don't you just say, like, are you an ultralighter? Are you just take what you need and you don't weigh your pack, or whatever you would term yourself real quick? Rose, want to go first?
I'm not an ultralight backpacker, so that's a very like defined thing, and I'm not. My pack is not under that weight limit. What is that? Is it 18 pounds, Chris? 17?
It seems to fluctuate.
Okay.
Some people say 10, some people say 18. I think it's more of a mindset.
Okay. Well, there's like lightweight and then ultralight. I don't think I'm either one. But I think my total pack weight, usually with food and water for like 3 days, is usually about 30 pounds plus or minus 1 or 2. So minus food and water, I guess that brings it to around 18, 20. So I'm just like a little bit over the line. I'm like conscious of the weight I'm carrying, but I'm not, you know, I'm on a budget and, you know, not terribly concerned usually. Like I try to cut weight sometimes, but I'm not breaking myself over it.
Hey, Chris, how would you define your style?
Ultralight. I don't really like being confined by that term though, because well, like, I mean, I carry camera gear, so it's if I don't have camera gear, my base weight normally is around 10 pounds. But like I found on my through hike, there were things that I wanted to carry that made me feel more comfortable. Like I carried toenail clippers almost the whole way. And I alluded to the kite. Yeah, I don't go super crazy on my base weight, but at the same time, if it's something that's going to make me feel more comfortable or enjoy, you know, what I'm doing more, then I'll carry that extra weight. But I have found the areas that I've gone lighter have afforded me the luxury of carrying a camera, or if it's a hot day and I have to carry Winnie's pack for her, I don't feel burdened by carrying her stuff or some of these extra things. I know I start to turn into a baby if I'm carrying over 30 pounds though. Like anywhere between 30 and 40, I'm starting to kind of cry like a child.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do. I do. Well, I think that's interesting. I'm of the opinion I pack what I need, only what I need. Everything I pack should have multiple uses, and and buy as light as I can afford. But I like that you mentioned that by going ultralight, it gave you an opportunity to carry other things that made you comfortable. So would you say those things were your luxury items, or did you have something else that you would call? Because I know some people ask, what's your one luxury item that you couldn't live without on the trail?
My camera. Yeah, my luxury. Yeah, my camera. I won't backpack without a camera. And the rest of my kit, I still have a down quilt. I have an almost frameless pack. I'm a tarp camper, so I don't use a tent. I just use like a square tarp. So there's definitely areas where I've absolutely gone ultralight. I guess the camera really, it's my only consistent luxury item. If I go out backpacking for a week, I'm not carrying toenail clippers with me. That was just kind of a thing on my thru-hike. Yeah, the camera pretty much is my only luxury item. A heavy one, but
Okay. Rose, do you have a luxury item?
I think Chris actually brought up a good point, because it depends for me on how long I'm going to be out. So if I'm just out for, a couple days, I might not. There are some things that I would probably skip, but then other things that I might add that I wouldn't normally bring on a longer trip. So I might have like maybe more luxurious food options on a shorter trip, that kind of thing, I guess. And also it depends on the weather. Like, so on my thru hike, most of the time I had a town dress with me that was like fairly lightweight, and it was just super comfortable. Could wear it all the time. Didn't need a sports bra. It was great. And I tried to not bring that with me on sort of the second part of my hike when I was finishing up in the spring. I cut down my base weight probably by 3 to 5 pounds when I got back on trail, including that dress. So I left it home, and like the first town I got to, I regretted it. And so I think with the second town, I found like a really skimpy dress at a shop, and it was at a grocery store in Damascus. I don't know why there were dresses there, but it was only like $5 or something like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do it, and the rest of the trip is gonna be better. But I probably wouldn't do that kind of thing on a winter hike. Like I haven't had like any kind of town clothes during winter hikes that I've done so far. Admittedly, I haven't done any that have been very long in the winter, only a couple days. That's
All right,
about
real quick. All right, how about what was the best piece of gear that you had at the beginning of your trip and you still had at the end of your trip?
Who's going first? My backpack.
Your backpack. What kind of backpack do you have?
I use a hyper light pack. Well, I ended up buying a new one after my thru hike. I had the Wind Rider 4600, I think. I ended up buying, it was pretty gross by the time I got home. It's still functional, but I bought basically the same pack, just smaller. But yeah, I love my hyper light pack.
Awesome. Rose?
So my answer is a buff, technically I lost the one that I started with on like the last day of the first part of my hike. I think I left it in a shuttle driver's car, is my guess. But I hadn't even heard of buffs before the trail, and someone gave me one right before I started, and it's just the best piece of technology. If anyone doesn't know, it's just like I probably have one like right here, but it's just like a tube of cloth basically, and it can be made of different things. There's sort of like a summer lighter weight version and a heavier wool version. Buff is technically a brand name. I don't know if there's a non-brand name for it, but I've heard them called like boho bandos and other things like that. But they're just super versatile, and I never go hiking without one. It keeps my hair and sweat out of my face in the summer, and also can keep my ears warm, or can use it as a mask. They've become really popular this year, or last year. I think we sold out of them at the store. And everyone was buying them as Christmas gifts. But yeah, I love buffs. They're so great.
I have one on right now.
Hey, there you go.
All right, now let's go in the other direction. What was a piece of gear you started with that you thought was going to be great and you ended up chucking because it just didn't serve any purpose? And did you have more than one?
I have a long list.
I was going to say about your reaction, Rose.
I'll let Rose go first.
Oh, so some of the things I sent home with the first town I got to, Monson. Sunglasses. I'm super light sensitive, but I was just like, I don't need sunglasses out here. I don't know if it's partially just because of so much green tunnel, and maybe also just because my eyes adjusted to being outside all the time. But I just didn't feel like I needed them. I had a water bladder with me and didn't use it at all in those first like 12 days or whatever, and just felt like it was going to be too much work to clean it and fill another thing. I would probably use it if I did like the PCT or something like that with longer water stretches, but I just don't feel like it's necessary on the AT. That said, I probably don't drink enough water when I'm hiking, so maybe it would be good to have. I don't know. I think I also sent home a harmonica and a tin whistle. I don't know why I thought I would be able to keep up so many things when I was hiking. I didn't even keep up the comics very well when I was out there. But that was kind of the one thing I tried to keep. I think I sent home an extra shirt or something, and maybe an extra pair of socks. I think that's all that was on the first package back home.
All right, great. Chris?
I sent home some similar stuff. I started out with too many clothes. I had an idea similar to Rose, how she had her town dress. It's like idea in my head that I should carry clothes for in town, which for a guy would be a little bit different than like a lightweight sundress. I had like a pair of shorts and like a cotton t-shirt. By the time I got to my first town, which is the same as Rose's, Monson, at that point, you've completed the 100-mile wilderness. You've been out there for like 10 days. And the clothes that I had packed that I was going to wear in town smelled like everything else in my pack. So I got rid of those. I also had it kind of set in my head that each night I was going to change out of my hiking clothes and into camp clothes, which I think I did like the first 2 nights. The rest of the time I was just too tired and crawled into my sleeping bag with what I was wearing. So I sent a lot of camp clothes home. I'm trying to think, because like throughout the whole trip, I kind of found myself like mailing stuff home, but also buying stuff that I would use for a little bit and then mail home. Like the kite, and I kept the kite. It ended up getting mailed home. Somewhere along the lines, I guess I sent the toenail clippers home towards the end. But I found myself, in New Hampshire. I ended up at, it's like near Lincoln. There some alien abduction or something happened there, and I ended up at a gas station and bought this like green inflatable alien that I thought would be fun to have him like strapped to my pack. So I carried him for a little bit, and then I was like, this is kind of ridiculous, and mailed it home. So what I was carrying that I didn't really need kind of fluctuated. But yeah, I mean, the big one was I started out with too many clothes.
Okay. Thanks for that, guys. Let's talk about a big piece, and that's resupply, and talk about how did you plan out your food? Did you send food boxes ahead, or did you just rely on going into town for your food? How did you handle that aspect of the trip?
I almost exclusively just kind of went as I hiked along, just resupplied in towns, like at grocery stores and all of that, gas stations, just whatever was around. There were maybe like, I don't know, maybe 4 times throughout the trail where I had my mom send me a few things. One of the biggest things was just like smaller portions of like the little emergency vitamin C packets. I really liked having those in my water, but I didn't want to buy a whole box. And so she would just send me a few now and then. But that was only like 4 times throughout the whole trip. And I know at one point during the second part of my hike, I had her send me a short sleeved t-shirt because I had like a triple sunburn from going through the Grayson Highlands. It was only like a 60-degree day in April at the time, but it's just super exposed there, and I was only wearing a tank top, and so I got really, really burnt, and then I got burnt again. Hopefully I don't get skin cancer. So far so good. Yeah, so she sent me a shirt. Other than that, I wasn't really getting sent stuff along the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, and maybe you can, in your description, describe how you handled Winnie's supplies as well.
Yeah, so since so I was like kind of split 50-50. Almost every town that I caught a ride into, in some capacity, I was picking up a package. And even before Winnie joined me, so I had this idea in my head before my hike. One, to try and learn how to dehydrate my own food, and all of it came out horrible. I don't recommend that. But I had this idea of if I had like my breakfast and dinners sent to me, then I would still go to the store and pick up whatever I wanted for snacks and for lunch. Then on top of that, Winnie's food, was mailed. So I did the regional rate boxes instead of the it fits, it ships.
Mm-hmm.
So you're charged based on how many zip codes away it's getting mailed. And had a roommate, on my way out of town, I'd send him a text message, hey, send 4 days worth of food to blah, blah, blah town. With resupply boxes, it's definitely, I wouldn't do it that way if I were to do the AT again, simply because maybe I think it's going to take 4 days to get to the next town, but it takes me 3. Then I'm going into that town with, extra food in my pack, picking up more food that's already been mailed to me, and now I'm hiking out with too much food. It definitely, I mean, it was nice sometimes. And I would order from Amazon too. Like for breakfast, I just do the Carnation instant breakfast. A lot of times I would just order them off Amazon and have them shipped to a hostel of whatever town I was going into. But but yeah, so as far as for Winnie, she was just on regular dry dog food. And I would order her dog food online and have it shipped to my house. And then my roommate would divide it up and mail it out for me, just in freezer bags.
Awesome. Great. Is there one food that you will never eat again because you ate too much of it on the trail?
Any kind of bar, Cliff Bars, like the hidden or like the Nature Valley bars. No, I could never eat a Cliff Bar or anything like that ever again. I don't think.
Rose, what
Oh,
do you
and
think?
spam packets. I'll never.
Ew,
I
no.
can't eat
Oh.
spam packets ever
I
again.
never went that far. I don't know. I don't eat bars in my day-to-day life at all anymore, really. I still have them sometimes on hiking trips. I don't know if there's really anything that I'll just never eat again. There was a while where I was kind of burnt out on Snickers, but I got over that. Yeah, I don't know. Quick note on resupply boxes, though. I will say it's a good idea if you have any like big dietary restrictions. But if you don't, I would probably not do resupply boxes for the AT specifically. There are other places like the PCT and CDT where it's kind of harder to get food in town, so you might just need to ship yourself things. But for the AT, unless you have specific dietary restrictions, I'd probably opt against it.
A quick question, just because it just popped in my head. Did you have to replace your hiking shoes or boots more than once while you're on the trail, or did one pair last you? No, did okay. So Rose, how many did you go through?
I think it was 5 or 6. I could probably count. I started out with boots. That was a bad choice because I'm not actually used to boots. And they were a little bit, they didn't allow for me to have my feet expanding on the trail. And so I had some damage from that, repaired quickly, but and then I got some trail runners from Saucony. I think that's how you say that. And I really liked those. They wear down kind of quickly, but also, again, wettest year on record, so that wears down shoes a lot quicker. And I had a pair of Keens briefly that gave me terrible blisters, but I did wear them for a long time, longer than any of the others, probably 700 miles. And then I think I had 2 or 3 more pairs of the same Saucony shoes that I got again. So 5 or 6.
I went through 3 pairs of trail runners and then a pair of boots at the end.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Now,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I pushed my trail runners each time. I pushed them further than I should have, I think. So if I had been replacing them when I probably should have, I think it probably would have been like 4 or 5 pairs of trail runners instead of the 3.
Okay. Just a quick, if you give our participants a quick tip on your footwear. Now, I always tell people, go see a professional and get fitted and know what kind of needs you have for your feet, because you really need to take care of your feet, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable. I think Rose kind of example illustrates that. So any tips, because you both ended up wearing trail runners, but you both had boots too, and so I think that's interesting to point out. So
Well, I ended in boots. I didn't really want to, but because I didn't finish till January 14th of 2020. So basically it was like Harrisburg, Virginia, until I got into Georgia. In some capacity, every day I was dealing with snow.
right.
So it got to the point with my trail runners that it was no longer a good idea.
Good point. point.
Yeah, it's I realized pretty quickly that the trail runners in 6 inches of snow was not gonna work. Wasn't gonna get me to Georgia.
Exactly. Okay. Rose, you have a tip?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think is just to know that there's no one perfect shoe for everyone. Not even one perfect shoe for an activity. And everyone's feet are going to be really different. So just because, ultras are like the most popular trail shoe the last few years, like doesn't mean that it's going to be good for you. I mean, I like them, but I also think I need to start wearing insoles with them to, give my feet some more support. Yeah, I think some people are flat-footed and some people are not. Some people maybe are doing lighter hiking. Some people maybe are doing more rock scrambling and maybe want something a little bit grippier. So, there's a lot of variety out there, and just don't get a shoe unless it really sings to you. Don't settle on shoes.
That's great advice, and that's why I always suggest to people go see a professional. Talk about what you're doing, what your needs are, get fitted. If they don't have what really works for you, then go to another place that has some other options available. We're fortunate Mountain Trails has a nice selection, and they're really good at really trying to help fit you right. So they fit me. I mean, I actually have 4 different pairs of shoes actually, depending on what kind of hiking, what the terrain is, the weather, and all that. So so different uses for different boots or shoes for different needs.
Well, I also think just since we're talking about footwear, having a good sock that works for you is kind of like that second piece of that puzzle. There's so many different types of socks out there, but you could have the best, trail runner or boot and a horrible pair of socks that just don't work for you, and it's not gonna, the boot's not gonna to work as well. So I throw that little part in there too.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and that's something that I've realized too. And I have a drawer, my big drawer half full of hiking socks, because I think I have just about every brand, every thickness. I have different socks for summer than for winter, or if I know it's gonna be raining or whatever. You're right, and of course you also have to replace your socks because some of them wear out pretty quickly, and then you learn what quality or brand works the best. So great point, Chris. Thanks for bringing that up. I see that we're getting close to the 7:30 mark where we start opening up for question and answers, but I wanted to talk about 2 things specifically, and that is post-trek issues, because you kind of get into, it's a different world when you're on the trail, and you're out there for quite a long time. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit how you adjusted to your pre-hike life, or if you actually did, or if you had a different life after your hike, and if you have any tips to do that, and maybe any tips for families and friends to help you with that, to help other hikers with that adjustment.
I know I definitely had some fairly severe post-trail depression. Not when I finished the trail, because I was finishing I finished May 12th. So I was going into the daylight in the summer, and that really helped that time around. But when I got off the trail for my break from the winter and isolation and everything, and my stress fracture, which is always just a side note to me, but that was October 31st, and it was right before daylight savings ended, and I already get like seasonal depression anyway in the winter, and that was it was really rough, and I was pretty immobile. Like I could walk around, but I was limping, and my brother had totaled not my car, the car that I was using, and so I couldn't really get around much, and I got a job at Target, a seasonal job, which involved a lot of moving around, which was good, and it was really good that I had like something to do that kind of forced me to get out of the house and move around and interact with people. it was also really strange going into like a consumerist corporate environment right after living in the woods for 4 months, 4.5 months. And it was really hard for me to connect with people. I like only wanted to talk to trail people or people who I felt like could understand. And fortunately, Andrea, who had hiked some with me, she lived in the same town as me, and so we got to be together and kind of commiserate together. But it was really rough, and I was a little bit of an asshole and like not fun to be around, I'm sure, a lot of the time. And like I wanted to go to bed early, and I didn't like a lot of like, I was like super like sensitive, like sensory sensitive, like too much light, too much noise, like up too late. I'm like, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I don't know, it felt like the people I was around for the most part didn't really understand how to deal with that, or didn't understand what I was going through. And that was pretty rough, and I was like crying every day. But that said, I also didn't know if I was going to be able to get back on trail at the time, and that's part of why I delayed going to the doctor, because I didn't want her to tell me that I couldn't get back on trail. And yeah, but that was one of the bigger turning points, was even just deciding to go see a doctor about my foot, like started to get me out of that post-trail depression. And then seeing her and like getting my foot a bit better, and then daylight savings starting again, and just more daylight, more sun. I'm a very sun-oriented person. That all helped. I will say, as far as like advice for family and friends of people who are hiking, I know there's a book that Juliana Chauncey published recently called Hiking from Home. And it's kind of just like advice for family and friends of thru-hikers, or long distance hikers. So that's probably a really good resource for anyone. But things that I wanted that I didn't necessarily get, I got some of these things, but things I recommend trying to give to your long distance hiker friends when they come home. Give them like a bath kit of some kind. Man, I took so many baths when I got home, like once or twice a week at least. It was just the best thing. It was kind of some of my sanity at the time. Home cooked meals, space, quietness, but also like kind of more intimate, like smaller group things and one-on-one things, because that's a lot of what the trail was for me, of just like kind of those deeper connections, and like not too much noise, but like we're all just hanging out, getting to know each other, or just creating a more intimate and real space. Massages, if you can give someone a massage certificate or give someone a massage after a thru hike, oh my god, be an angel. Or a spa or something like that. I'm not really a spa person, but man, that would have been great right after my thru hike. And also invitations to exercise, because a lot of the time, one of the things that causes post-trail depression is just like purely on a physical, like biological level. You're like dropping your endorphin level like drastically. And so you don't get that like exercise high, and your body doesn't know how to deal with that anymore. And so it's really important to have some kind of plan to exercise when you get home from the trail. Whatever is accessible to you. It doesn't have to be walking. I know I really craved swimming and running when I was on the trail. Those things aren't so accessible out there, but maybe they are at home for you. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Talked a lot. You go, Chris.
I don't. So I got home 1 year ago yesterday. Finished the 14th of January. Took my time coming home. Came home on the 20th. Um, I guess I'm still like quote unquote fresh enough off trail that I'm still actually trying to process it. I also came home to a really bizarre year with the pandemic, and right when I got home was I didn't know if we were going to war with Iran, and there were forest fires in Australia, and I went right back to work, which I actually wouldn't recommend. I basically came home and went back to work at both of my jobs like a week later, and never even, I didn't take the time to just like, whoa, like what just happened. And actually at my career job, I remember it was like my second day back, and I was trying to find a hammer, and no one would help me, and I just like went behind a shop building and just started crying. So I think, I mean, I did the best that I could coming home to the circumstances that we found ourselves in last year to deal with. I did a lot of writing, long walks with Winnie, like in the neighborhood. I wanted to get into running, but my knees were too shot. So yeah, definitely I'm staying active, but I think I was home for like 4 months before I finally like didn't sleep in a sleeping bag. I just like kept sleeping in my sleeping bag. I guess the thing I struggled with the most was like I came home, I felt like, I was like some hero, like I did, this, I was on this amazing journey, and I just wouldn't shut up about it. And I mean, it was within a week, people were like, when they're like, well, how was your thru hike? They just really, what they wanted to hear was, oh, it was awesome. And that's about it. But as soon as anyone mentioned, brought up my thru hike, I would just start talking and talking and talking. And so I think, in finishing a thru hike and coming back when there's like not like a pandemic and lockdowns and stuff like that, it is important. Like Rose was saying, hang out with other hikers, staying active, whether it's the gym or going for a hike, and like letting your body heal. Like when I started my thru hike, I was a size 11 and a half, and by the time I got to Georgia, my foot was a 13. So just like your body is going through such an incredible amount of stress. So yeah, like Rose was saying, it might not be walking or running, but it could be swimming, it could be riding a bike, stuff like that. I wish that I had better advice. Like I said, I came back into like a really weird set of circumstances last year.
Right.
That
I think it's good advice though. What you're giving, what you're both giving, is just to stay active and to stay in contact with your hiking community, and yeah, and do those things that you need to do, whatever it may be. And Chris, that's a great segue. I did want to touch a little bit on COVID and how it's changed the trail. The ATC is maintaining its position from last year, so they're not going to honor thru hikes this year with the 2,000 miler patch. They're discouraging thru hiking, but they are encouraging, if you're going to do it, to register your hike and things like that. I know there was controversy last year, with this idea that shelters were closed or the AT's closed, and how can we do that? But I'm wondering if you can shed a little light on that in terms of, because I know we're going to have record thru hikers this year, and we're still in a pandemic. So I wonder if you can share anything on that to kind of, for maybe anybody who's going to be out there this year.
I mean, we're far enough into this thing now that, we know about social distancing and wearing a masks and not gathering in large groups. And I'm not going to comment on the ATC's decision, as far as their stance, that it wouldn't be my place. Whether I agree with it or I don't, that's not my place. If people are going to hike, they're going to hike. I do think that it's really important, though, to consider, it is one thing when you're on trail and you're by yourself. But when you go into these little towns, it's definitely really important to remember, it might be a town of 200 people, and like the grocery store that you're going to, it might be a Dollar General, and that's all they have in that town. And I guess this is one of those situations where hikers could get a really bad name, especially going into town and maybe flaunting, or not flaunting, but like disregarding social distancing guidelines, or state and local mandates on masks and stuff like that. It's, God forbid I'm on the AT and I pick up the virus in one town, and 14 days later I'm halfway through Virginia in another little town and I'm infecting that town. I don't know. I know that I know it's a touchy subject, but I do think it's definitely important. Like when I was on trail, I'm probably gonna screw the saying up, but there was like the saying, like follow the people that have gone before you, but clear the way for the people behind you. So somebody that's, passed through a town 2 weeks before me might have completely soured like the reputation of hikers before I even get there and know what happened. And there's been unfortunate cases of that, like outside of a pandemic, if like a hiker, steals from a grocery store, or, that they're getting drunk and running all over town, all of a sudden, people are kind of associating that with all hikers. So I do think that, in the age of COVID-19, you're representing all hikers, regardless of your choices, how you conduct yourself in town and all that. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, I think that's good. And I think it's important to point out that traditionally hikers might congregate at shelters at the end of the day. So maybe there might be more distancing, using more campsites. Maybe they won't all go into shelters. Maybe they won't be sharing food and utensils and things like that. I thank you for pointing out the small towns with small stores and really making sure that you're being aware of what the local mandates are and following them. I think that's really key in maintaining the reputation of hikers, because I think I know around here it's something we've worked really hard at, is being hiker friendly and realizing, and changing the view of local folk towards hikers. So we want to make sure that we keep that. And then the other thing, so thank you. I don't know if Rose, did you have a comment on that, or?
I feel like Chris said it pretty well.
Awesome. All right, we have a couple of questions, so I want to answer them real quick. I have quite a few more questions, but we'll take care of our attendees first. One question was, did each of you utilize hostel stays as part of your thru hiking plan? And if so, how often?
I was definitely planning on hostels and use them a fair bit. I feel like I probably stayed in a hostel roughly once a week. I maybe sometimes just bought a shower and then kept going. But yeah, I think, every 5 to 8 days or so, I probably stayed in a hostel or a Trail Angel kind of place.
Great, Chris.
I stayed in a ton of hostels. Anytime that I was staying in town, if there was a hostel, I would definitely stay at the hostel. There were a couple times where, there'd be 5 or 6 of us splitting a hotel room. But especially once I got into the South, winter had come kind of early in the South in 2019. And I mean, God, there's so many hostels in the South. You could almost like stay at a hostel every night if you wanted. But I had found, I love hostels.
Great.
I got sucked into the vortex at a couple of them where I would stay there like 3 nights before I hiked back out.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. I mean, some of these hostel owners they're just great hosts. I mean, they immediately take you in as family, and you don't want to leave, especially when you're out there for so long. Another question is your favorite section of the Appalachian Trail.
Maine.
Okay, Rose.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris already knows. Maine is mine as well. I do really love most of Virginia, really all of Virginia, and New Hampshire. There isn't really much that I didn't like. Pennsylvania is annoying and have a vendetta because of my stress fracture, but even that has its perks, or its pretty spots. And that's where you reach the halfway point, so that's kind of a thing. Yeah, Maine is very near and dear to my heart. It just smells so good there. It smells so good.
Massachusetts and New Jersey were surprisingly awesome.
Yes, my home state. Love
Which
it.
one, Mass?
New Jersey.
Yeah, I loved New Jersey. I wasn't expecting that. On New Jersey was in my top 5.
Awesome.
Yeah, probably number 5.
It's unexpectedly beautiful.
Well, I think okay, I'm a Jersey girl, I admit it. We get a bad rap because people only think of Jersey like Newark and Elizabeth along the turnpike. We forget we're the Garden State, and the AT goes to the northwest portion. It's gorgeous. It just really is. So I'm really glad you gave a plug to my home state. Yay. How about one other question was if you have a sock recommendation. Is there a particular brand or something like that you always reach for? Or does it depend on weather, time of year, shoe you're wearing?
I almost exclusively use Darn Tough. I always rave about Injinji toe socks because my toes kind of curl in a little bit, so I'm a little bit more prone to toe blisters. But I used them on a backpacking trip this week, and I got pretty bad blisters, or a blister on my heel, and I think it's because of those. But the liner socks are a different texture than they're just like regular socks. So I don't know. I might ditch the liners for now.
Yeah, I'm a darn tough guy too. But I guess I go back and forth between darn tough and smart wool. Smart wool I like, but I feel like if I put them on too hard, I'm the one that rips them, not my shoe. So I tend to stick more with darn tough.
All right, great.
They also have the lifetime guarantee, so I always tell everyone when they come into mountain trails, like, if you need some socks, you can get Darn Tough and just like buy 7 pairs, and then you never have to buy socks again, and your life is good. And also they're wool, so you can just keep wearing them a few times before you wash them.
Great tip. Something else I wanted to cover, if anybody else who's attending tonight, if you have a question, go ahead and throw it into the group chat. Another question I have for you is any conservation issues that you saw along the trail that that we can do regularly as hikers while we're out there, maybe something to raise awareness that we might need to do. Rose, you're nodding.
Yeah, I have 2 notes off the top of my head. One is I was surprised how clean the trail was going through. I didn't see very much litter at all. The occasional, M&M or a little corner of a wrapper, and I usually try to pick those up. But one thing that people can do is try not to widen the trail, and try not to make new side trails if you can help it. I know sometimes there's blowdowns and you kind of have to go around. But you know, sometimes when the trail is a bit wet or muddy, people try to go around the mud, and that ends up making the trail wider and even muddier, and is not good for the trail. Another thing actually along those lines is just a hiker etiquette thing. So the group gets the right of way if you're crossing paths with other people. If you're just one or two people, then you or whoever you're with, the smaller group should move to the side and let the, you know, group of 12 Boy Scouts go past you or whatever. I can't tell you how many times, you know, the Boy Scouts are trying to be chivalrous and whatnot, and they all start stepping to the side. I'm like, no, stop! You're hurting the trail. Like, I appreciate the thought, but group gets the right of way. So yeah, that's my spiel.
Great, thanks. Chris, anything?
Bury your poop, please. Bury your poop.
Yes,
that's my big one. And there's a stretch through like all of Tennessee. There's no privies. There's just a giant shovel at the shelter, and like one side is where you get your water. Like one side of the ridgeline you get your water. The other side of the ridgeline is where like you poop, and it the amount of just bury your poop. That's gonna be my big one.
right. And you can get a trowel at Mountain Trails. It's really light, aluminum, very light. Go get one, use it, learn how to use it. There's some great memes you can use. We have a request from one of our attendees. Mike would like to know your best trail angel story or find. So your best trail magic.
Oh man.
I think one of the better stories, at least, I mean, best trail magic I got was probably from my brother, who did like repeated trail magic for me when I was hiking near him. He lived in Blacksburg at the time. He did all kinds of incredible things for me. In fact, in the comics, he's always has a halo around his head. But best story is probably when I was in New York, and there was no hostel around, and I had terrible blisters, and I had this whole like really sketchy hitchhiking story that you can hear about on Trail Tales, the podcast. Won't get into that, but let's just say I had a crazy day the day before, and ended up spending the night at a drive-in movie theater in Warwick.
In Warwick, I stayed at that.
Nice. So I was in a hammock the whole time, and there wasn't really a good hammock space there, and it was a hot night and really buggy, and so I just slept on the picnic table and was super uncomfortable the whole time because there were bugs and really hot and all of that, and I like pretty much didn't sleep. I was considering, there's like this half joke thing on the trail about getting on Tinder just to try to find somewhere to sleep. I was like almost considering it. And I was, you know, it's like 2 a.m. I'm looking up like, you know, what's the cheapest hotel around here, and everything's like way out of my budget. I was on a super tight budget the whole time. And so finally it's like 6 a.m. I'm like, okay, grocery store is probably open. I'll go do my resupply. And did that, and went to get a bagel or something. There was a bagel shop. And finally I realized someone I had met once but was connected to on Instagram had mentioned that she once worked at an ice cream shop that's actually right on the trail in Warwick. And so I asked her I messaged her and was like, do you still have any connections around here? And she's like, yeah, my mom lives there. And so she got me in touch with her, and then basically I was trail magic to Nap, and you know, a night stay there, and they were really lovely folks. So that's probably one of my better trail magic stories, I think.
I'm not, I don't know if I could actually pinpoint. So similar to what Rose was saying, like I feel like the best trail magic wasn't like the burgers getting cooked at, you know, where the trail crosses a road, but there were countless times where maybe I went to go check into a hostel and somebody had already paid for my stay, or a complete stranger, you know, I'm hitchhiking into town and they just let me camp in their backyard. I feel like, you know, especially up north, you know, as I was hiking south was kind of where, you know, all the northbounders were up there, and it almost got to a point like in New Hampshire and Vermont where like, oh, a road's coming up, like I'll bet you there'll be a cooler with soda. That type of quote unquote trail magic was awesome, but I feel like all the times it just like the complete kindness of a stranger, or like the friend of a friend of a friend had heard, you know, you were in the area, whether it was a hot shower or just a place to crash for the night, or, you know, a home cooked meal. I don't feel like I have like one specific instance, but the best trail magic was absolutely just the kindness of a complete stranger that didn't even, you know, that was their way of kind of being a part of your journey. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the best. Thanks, guys. I see we're coming to the end of our time, so I wanted to give you each an opportunity. In addition to, guys, you can go see them at Mountain Trails, either in Winchester or Front Royal. They'll give you tips, they'll help you pick gear, they'll tell you more stories if you'd like. But I also know you guys are on social media, and I know Rose has her artwork, so I'm going to give you both a chance to let people know where else they can find you. So Rose, maybe you'd like to go first?
Sure. I'm on Instagram mostly. My handle is Rotu Comics. That's ROTU Comics. And you can kind of find the rest of my stuff off of there. But I have a website that's the same address, rotucomics.com, and a Patreon page as well, which paid for my thru-hike before I had considerable student debt and all of that. But yeah, that's me.
Okay. And Chris, where can they find you?
On Instagram, it's a walk with Winnie, but there's an underscore in between each word. And it's Winnie, WINNIE.
Awesome. I'm a follower, by the way, and a fan of both of you both. Rose, do you have an image or two that you wanted to share with the folks of something from your check that you've drawn before we sign off?
Let me do this.
Well, while you pull it up, we'll just thank everybody for joining us tonight in the first in the series. Awesome. Here it comes.
Is this working okay?
Yes, we're seeing it.
I'm not used to screen sharing. So this is, yeah, this is what I carried with me when I first started, and pretty much through most of the trail. I just had my sketchbook, so I could put in 2 square comics on this kind of weird shaped sketchbook. And I had my little watercolor toolkit, watercolor kit. And I actually put in dabs of other colors. Actually, these 2 weren't in there when I was on the trail, but I put in some black over here. And then I had really just like pencil, a watercolor brush. So you can fill this with water, and it makes it really, really nifty and easy to do watercolors on the trail. And just a couple kinds of pens. One of the funny things I had my mom send me was an eraser. I'm like, Mom, okay, just go into my room open this one drawer. There'll be a few erasers there. I want this specific one. And yeah, and then I had my little journal, which is quite small and light, but I tried to write about each day. I didn't necessarily write on the days, but I tried to, and just a couple notes about each day really, and at least like a highlight or something I was thinking about, and then wherever I camped that night. And so when I'm making the comics, which I'm still working on now, I'll reference my notes and then look through my pictures and maybe ask other people I was hiking with that day to get like a fuller scope, which is sometimes very humbling. But yeah, so there's that one. And then a few of my comics that I made, they're kind of a wide variety. Like I kept the format overall the same, like they're all a square, and they all have like kind of the date and the how many days into the hike it is and where I hiked to. But within that format, sometimes they're more like thoughtful, I guess, or introspective, and sometimes they're like really silly. And it's interesting though, the process for making these over the last 2.5 years. I mean, I started them before I actually got on the trail.
Funny.
And yeah, you know him. I didn't know until a while after I met Susan that she actually trail magicked hot rocks when he came into Front Royal.
Yeah.
So that's extra funny for her, I'm sure. But my skill has developed a lot in the last 2.5 years, and so it's interesting trying to keep the style similar and cohesive. Yeah, some of them are kind of more imaginative. And some of them are, you know, just kind of a little picture, kind of just a little watercolor thing. You got to show some of the lows of the trip.
Oh, those are great.
There's a lot of text
And they
in
can see
one.
more of your comics on your Instagram, correct?
Yeah, just underline. Yes, yeah. They're not all public. Right now I'm posting 1 out of 3 that I make. But yeah, I was just gonna underline that Andrea Groves is one of the most incredible humans I've ever met. And this is her here. But yeah, and then it's not like there's a lot of southbounders out there. So at one point there were 7 of us somehow hiking together for a couple days. And we hiked 3 miles. We did like 2 big days in a row. Like I did my first marathon and then I caught up to them and did I think 25 miles to them. And then on this day, we all hiked 3 miles, got to this shelter. None of us had slept well the night before, so we decided to take a nap, and then we decided to just stay there after only 3 miles. And it was kind of one of the best days on the trail. Yeah.
Awesome.
Anyway, it's a little sampling.
Great. Thank you for sharing. I like your art. It's
Thank you.
yeah, you've got great color and you've got great storylines. I love it. Thank you. And I hope everybody else takes some time and visits your site and sees more of your work, or go to Happy Creek, one of the Happy Creek coffee shops. Your stuff is there as well. Well, we're at the end of our time, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I hope you're as inspired as I am to do some long distance trekking. And for more information as to local hiking resources or just the Appalachian Trail, you can find the Appalachian Trail Conservancy online. You can go to our Warren County Front Royal Appalachian Trail Community Facebook page, and we have a bunch of resources posted there. And I understand that tomorrow you'll receive, just as a little thank you for joining us tonight, sheet of resources that we put together of all local hiking resources.
You can
One
also
of my-
always talk to me in person at mountain trails. I always
Yes.
love whipping out the trail maps there.
Absolutely. So go see these guys at Mountain Trails. And then next month, on the third Thursday, come join us again. I actually have 2 more thru hikers who are going to join us, but they're a little different. They did their thru hikes a while ago. And after their thru hike, they went through some major changes. They made big moves in their lives, and they are now very active in their community, supporting hikers and whatnot. So I'm not going to share yet who they are, but they have really interesting stories. And one of them, moved halfway cross country right after her hike. So we'll share their stories and how their thru hikes impacted their lives long term. So until then, I just hope you all have fun exploring the outdoors and have grand adventures and happy trails. Barbara, did you want to say anything? All right, awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And thank you guys. Rose and Chris, you're awesome. I'll
Thank
definitely be
you.
down to see
Thank
you
you.
guys. And hope to see you out on the trails. Good night, everyone.